Hey, I'm Zach.
And I'm Jesse.
And you're watching In Depth.
On Now You Know.
Head over to ecoware.us where you can help support our channel with new designs every week. We carbon offset the production, shipping, and life cycle of every product, and we plant a tree for every order. And we're brought to you by abetterrouteplanner.com. They just passed 15 million trips planned, and there is a new app for Android and Apple, making it even easier to use a Better Route Planner on your next EV trip.
And we're brought to you by the Fairfield Inn and Suites by Marriott. This is in Schaumburg, Illinois. It is the highest rated Marriott in the Schaumburg area. It has 2 Tesla charging stations and 2 additional level 2 chargers, and they're both solar powered.
So Jesse, you want to buy some stock in Nikola?
You mean Tesla?
Well, Nikola Tesla, but Nikola, remember the company that makes the hydrogen battery electric trucks?
Right, the hydrogen truck.
Yeah.
Yes, Nikola.
Yeah, so we get a lot of messages from people who want to invest in electric companies, and that's great. We need to be investing in companies that are building our EV future. The good news, if you're bullish on Nikola, which is the company making the hydrogen fuel cell / battery-powered semi-trucks and the Badger pickup truck, that Nikola announced last week they have partnered with Vector Q Acquisition Corporation, or VTIQ on the NASDAQ, which is a publicly traded acquisition company, and upon closing of this agreement, the combined company will be named Nikola Corporation and will be listed under the new NASDAQ ticker symbol NKLA. You can actually buy stock in Nikola if you're interested now. It has become a publicly traded company. So Nikola claims to have more than 14,000 leases or $10 billion in pre-orders for their trucks to date.
Really?
Yeah. Trevor Milton, the founder and CEO of Nikola, stated, "We are on a roll. You couldn't ask for better news for the energy and tech industry. The world is transitioning to zero-emission platforms, and Nikola is the leader for heavy-duty vehicles. We believe we have a differentiated business model built on economics, not government subsidies. We now need to double down and speed up the timelines to get to market. We couldn't be happier to have Steve Gursky join our board." So who is Steven Gursky?
Steven Gursky is the CEO of Vector Q and a former vice chairman of General Motors Corporation.
Yeah, and he said, "In our 2-year quest to find a partner that was a proven technology leader and focused on making a global difference, Nikola was the clear winner." So we thought we'd deep dive here into Nikola so that we could figure out, is this something we all want to get behind and get excited about? So the IPO, or the initial public offering of Nikola, was for $10 a share, but the stock price quickly went up to about $15 on Thursday for a market cap of about $420 million.
So what has gotten people so excited about this company?
Some of the biggies in the industry, like Anheuser-Busch, have plunked down some money. Basically, they've ordered 800 semi-trucks from them.
Wow.
So that gives them a lot of clout, that if these big companies are ordering this many trucks from them, they must be onto something. And they stated that they want to build out a 700-station hydrogen fueling network.
Wow.
Now, I want to make a disclaimer here. We are not financial advisors. We're not telling you to buy or not buy stock. We don't give financial advice. Do your own research. Consult your own financial advisor before investing. So we're going to be talking about stock, but that doesn't mean you should listen to us when it comes to investing.
Okay, so when all is said and done next month, Nikola Corp is going to have about $1 billion to play with. What are they going to do with that money?
Well, Nikola currently has 260 employees, and they say that they're going to be hiring 140 more real soon.
260, that is a very small company.
Yep.
Like, not big at all.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's not tiny, but it's very small for the scope of what they're trying to accomplish. That is not very big.
And they have plans to build a 1 million square foot truck plant in Coolidge, Arizona, which is south of Phoenix, and they'll be starting in a couple months, and they claim they'll produce 35,000 to 50,000 trucks. They didn't say if that was per year or in 1 year. They just said that. I'm assuming that means in the first year. This was the main reason why they went public. They wanted to expedite the factory build. They claim that the time is right for building clean trucks, and CEO Trevor Milton says he wants to strike while the iron is hot. So they're partnering with Case New Holland, which is CNH Industrial, which is a publicly traded company under the CNHI ticker symbol on the New York Stock Exchange. But interestingly, I found out this company is controlled by an investment company, Exor, which is in turn controlled by the Agnelli family. So it doesn't sound...
The Agnelli family?
Yeah.
What, are they a mobster family?
It's an Italian family. I don't know. So
you don't know. They're Italian, but you're assuming that they're not mob connected?
I'm not assuming anything. I'm just telling you that it's a publicly traded company, but it doesn't sound like... it sounds like all the decisions go back to,
Mr. McNally.
McNally, right. So, I mean, CNH has many industrial brands that you probably recognize, like Case, New Holland, Iveco. It's a huge company with about 64,000 employees worldwide and about $27 billion a year in revenue. Nikola's first semi will be built by CNH at Iveco's plant in Ulm, Germany. And then get this, they're going to ship those back to the U.S. That is until they get their Arizona plant up and running. So the interesting thing here compared to Tesla is Nikola knows that they can't get factories up and running fast enough without having to use third parties first. So they're partnering with these big manufacturers who are going to make the trucks so that they can get to market as quickly as possible. I think this has a lot to do with Tesla being a competitor.
Right. So, but this isn't usually how companies grow. I mean, usually you have an idea and you start out in a garage with a piece of paper and a pencil, and you're coming up with some concept, some idea of what your business is going to be, whether it's a service or a product or an invention. And then you need some money. You need some seed money, something to buy the machines or the components that you need in order to make your first prototypes and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff Ubben, who's the chairman of Value Act Capital, who is investing millions in Nikola, he makes the case for this retail investor who is going to replace the VC firm in this case by bringing Nikola to IPO so early. So yeah, let's explain here. So basically you start this company in a garage, you get some funding from your mother-in-law or something, and then you got a product or some kind of, minimum viable product.
Something that you can bring to other potential investors, kind of like Shark Tank, not televised though, where you're kind of bringing this idea to investors, telling them about maybe even some of your intellectual property and being like, here's what we have, here's what we're working on. Right. If you want to get in now, you'll have so much amount of ownership of the company.
Right. You give up certain percentage of the company for some cash, and that's usually that's your seed round. That's either your angel round or your seed round. And at that point, usually venture capitalists, VC firms come in and invest a few $1,000,000 to get you through your first round where you are supposed to, get the product off the ground.
And that's where you're not even selling anything, right? You have all of these expenses, all of these people that you need to pay money to design stuff and produce stuff and all of this work that needs to happen before you're turning a profit.
But here's the thing. This is not your regular widget company. Normally, you make some kind of widget and you can get to market fairly inexpensively. You just need a few $1,000,000 to get a prototype and get a factory up and running. This is a capital-intensive thing that they're trying to do at Nikola. They're trying to make, first of all, expensive trucks. So those are, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then you're trying to make a network of hydrogen fueling stations. That's millions of dollars just to get a station built.
Right.
So the typical venture capitalist tends to not be as interested because it's going to be a lot longer till they can get their money. Usually they want to put in some money, a few years later, get out. And that's a lot harder. So they've decided to go direct to IPO, basically. And their argument is you're going to be able to make the kind of money that VCs usually make. The most growth in a company usually happens while it's still private. By the time it goes IPO and goes to the public market, you can still double or triple or whatever the company after that. But a lot of those people back in the early days when it went from 0 to like 20 million, they, went up 20 times.
Right.
So their argument here is, hey, get in on the IPO, buy stock, and you could be like a VC person. Our company could become what they claim is $100 billion company.
Right. And now, of course, it's going to take a little bit longer because there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen, but they claim to be moving pretty darn fast.
Right. So we want to kind of talk about what their goals are, what they think they're doing, so that if you are interested in investing or you want to follow along, you'll kind of know a little bit more about what's going on. So one of the things to keep in mind that when a company is privately funded through VC firms that we see a lot with companies is that when they get their first big infusion of cash, let's say they get 100 million during their B or C round, they tend to get a little fat and happy. They've been
bloated.
They've been scrappy for years, and then all of a sudden you get like $100 million. So it's like, yeah, we're gonna get our coffee bar, and we're gonna get to go on vacation.
And oh yeah, you want to hire your brother-in-law who's never had a real job? Yeah, you do that. Yeah, we'll get the juice bar. Hey, let's on Fridays at 3:00, let's stop working and all have a foosball match.
And the reason they can do that is because usually the VC firm puts one or two of their members on the board for oversight, but you just have like a quarterly meeting or a half-year meeting, and at that point you can kind of put on a dog and pony show and be like, we're doing great.
We're doing great, man. Oh, it's super great. We're working super hard, and also the juice bar is mad lit.
But when you go public, it means that every single day your shares are being traded. So if the least whiff of something comes out that's wrong, your share price can tumble, and so you've got to stay a little more disciplined.
Right. And when you're a public company, the rules are different. When you're a private company, everything is behind closed doors. The
Right.
public doesn't need to know what's going on, and it's really up to the VCs, the people who put the money in, to try and see what their money is doing. But when it's a public company, there are a lot more rules and regulations because you, the average person who put in, say a couple $1,000s to invest in a company like this, you don't have the resources. You can't call up the CEO and be like, hey, what are you doing with my money? You can't do that. So that's why we have regulations, and that is what's going to make this a little bit more interesting.
So this, according to the CEO, is the only listed hydrogen pure play listed in the world. So if you want to get into hydrogen, I guess this is one way to do it. So they value the deal at $3.3 billion when all of the dust settles. And as we just said, the price per share values this company at about $430 million. So obviously that's because there's a pipeline of money coming in and there's some future things happening. So take all that with a grain of salt about the value of the company. So here's the business model for this company. CEO Milton claims that you can take intermittent extra energy from the grid and you can make hydrogen with that, and then sell that hydrogen to a truck. Does that make sense?
So, but I thought that they were selling trucks.
They are selling trucks, but here's the thing. They're actually more interested in selling the hydrogen. That's where they're going to make their money. The truck is the guarantee that the hydrogen will be bought.
Oh, because the truck can't run on anything else.
Exactly.
It doesn't have a diesel port, it doesn't have a gas port, and it doesn't have an electrical plug.
Right. So they're going to be making electric trucks too. The electric trucks will have a range of about 300 miles, but they claim at Nikola that that is the maximum that an electric truck is efficient. Beyond that, having to carry all those extra batteries for ranges of like 500 miles is not as efficient as fuel cells. That's their claim. So they're going to plan to build out this network of hydrogen refueling stations, and they'll only build a refueling station once they have a bunch of trucks that are bought by a company. So let's say you're Anheuser-Busch, and you say, I'm going to drive from St. Louis to California, and we're going to buy, let's say, 100 trucks from you. Well, then Nikola is going to say, okay, the truck is $100,000. The lease per mile is $1 per mile. And so you're going to pay us $1 million per truck for the lease to use the energy on this route. And we will then build out where we think the station should go on this route. And so if you and I were to start a company to just build hydrogen stations, we would build some stations and then wait for someone to use them. And we'd be really worried every day that no one was using them because we'd be like, we have to pay this back.
And the hydrogen stations are really, really, really expensive.
Yes.
Okay. So far, it sounds pretty good.
Yeah, because they've de-risked this model by having the trucks on order. They basically have a built-in user of the energy.
Okay, but let me just ask you a question. Let's say that we are, again, two guys who are trying to get into the hydrogen business. So if we wanted to, we could wait a couple of years in after Nikola had kind of established their route or whatever, and we could say, hey, this is a route. It's being used by Anheuser-Busch. It goes from the barley fields to the brewery, and we think that there should be an extra hydrogen station in there right here. And we say, oh, and we can undercut them in terms of our hydrogen costs because at the moment, Nikola is basically a monopoly on hydrogen. We can undercut them, and then all of the truckers are going to want to stop here for cheaper hydrogen.
Right. And I don't know if the leases that they're signing mean that they're locked into using Nikola's charging stations. That would be my guess. So my guess is that we wouldn't be able to steal their trucks, because they would be legally obligated to stop at their own charging stations. That's my guess.
Weird. Okay.
Or that their nozzles wouldn't fit or something like that. That's what I'm guessing they would do.
Interesting.
Milton makes the claim that right now, fossil fuel companies make $1 million in diesel revenue for every truck on the road. And we did some calculations, and he could be right, depending on how many miles and the price of gas and so forth.
And how long a truck lasts.
Exactly. I mean, so if a truck drives for about 1 million miles before you need to replace it at the going rate of diesel, he could be about right. Our numbers came in a little bit lower than that. They came in at about $300,000.
It's not a little lower. That's quite a lot lower.
Yeah. But, I mean, there's a lot of other factors like maintenance and stuff. So let's just go with his estimate that $1 a mile is what they'll charge for the lease. And let's say that is cheaper than what a diesel truck can go for today. And some numbers we've seen show that could be true.
So you mentioned earlier that Milton claims that battery electric trucks work really well up to 300 miles, that they're cheaper to run up to 300 miles, but that after 300 miles, it's cheaper to do hydrogen because you're not carrying the batteries.
And here's where I get a little worried that he might be wrong, because a lot of this depends on a lot of different detailed factors that we don't know about. One is the batteries. If you can build an energy-dense enough battery cheaply enough, then he'll be wrong.
Right.
Also, if he can't make hydrogen efficiently enough, he'll be wrong.
Right. So he's saying basically that after 300 miles, the amount of batteries that you'd need to carry with you are so heavy that it's going to cut into the payload of what you can actually tow. And that means that it's going to be less efficient for you to have such a truck because there'll be so many batteries that you're not going to be able to have the loads that you normally would be able to carry.
And I want to remind everyone that this company will make an electric-only truck, a battery-only truck that goes up to 300 miles, and they plan to make a electric/hydrogen-powered truck. So both will have electric motors. Both are going to be clean. I'm excited about that.
Right.
It's just the hydrogen part that I'm not so sure about.
Right. So we don't know exactly how they're going to be producing this hydrogen.
Right. They claim that they're going to be doing grid buffering, which would also be awesome. Grid buffering means that when the grid is producing too much energy, then they really don't have anything to do with it. They basically just have to waste it. And what Nikola is saying is we'll be able to buy that energy wicked cheap to make hydrogen with. My question is this. Let's say from noon to 2 o'clock, there's way too much solar energy on the grid, and they're producing way more energy than they need. They're going to sell it to Nikola. Great. At a reduced price. Awesome. And Nikola takes this energy and makes hydrogen out of it. Can they make enough hydrogen in that small chunk of time to power up their system? I mean, it seems unrealistic that when the grid is dumping power during certain parts of the day, that Nikola will be able to quickly grab it, turn it into hydrogen in that small amount of time.
Right. And it really matters where this hydrogen is being produced. Is it being produced in a central location where you have this really big, facility where, as soon as the electricity starts flowing, you're like, excellent, everyone jump into your stations and let's make some hydrogen for 2 hours. And then you have a ton of it and then you have to ship it out to all of the stations? Or is it happening right at the station level, which means that you have this big electrical hookup, meaning that it's pretty much always producing hydrogen, and maybe you just produce more when the grid is, when the energy is cheap.
Right, because the idea of shipping hydrogen around, that's dangerous, first of all. And you then have to pressurize it when you get to the station.
Well, and the pressurization is something that I think gets missed a lot when we're talking about hydrogen. A lot of people want to point to the fact that with electrolysis, so that is converting water, H2O, into H2, pulling off the O, takes quite a bit of energy, and it's only about 75% efficient.
And that's in the best possible case.
That's in some of the best possible cases. So what you're essentially doing is taking energy, let's say 100 units of energy, stripping off the hydrogen from the oxygen from water. You put all the hydrogen in a tank. Now, if you wanted to reverse that, in a perfect world, if you were to reintroduce the oxygen to the hydrogen, in the best case scenario, you would have 75 units of energy as opposed to the 100 that you put in before. And in truth, when you put it through a fuel cell, it is not 100% efficient either. So you're looking at maybe 66 units of energy or maybe 50 units of energy. And so the 100 units of energy that you started with, now you end up with less. And that's just to get the hydrogen. Because what you need to do now is take all of this hydrogen that's floating around happily at atmospheric pressure, and you need to squeeze it. You need to pressurize it into a tank. So that way, when you put it through the fuel cell, you get enough hydrogen flowing through the fuel cell to actually do something.
Right.
And so that is where you have to take more units of energy to compress it, which means that it is even less efficient.
And I mean, currently, if you pull up to a hydrogen fuel charging station with your Toyota Mirage, and you plug in your car, charge up in 5 minutes, and go, the next guy who pulls in behind you has to wait half an hour while the charging station pumps up the hydrogen to pressure again.
Right.
So there's still problems with the system.
Right. And that's not to say that can't be solved with some kind of, we'll buy a bigger pump. But it does mean that it will be expensive. And right now we're talking, with the Mirage is a tiny passenger car.
Right.
It is not a giant truck that is going to need giant tanks of hydrogen to power it. So that is one other thing that we need to be considering is the pressurization.
But Milton claims that they have the largest hydrogen station in Phoenix, Arizona, and that they are already up and running with that, and that they're making 5 more stations this year. They also claim that they'll have trucks coming off the assembly line next year in the first or second quarter. So they're less than 12 months out from actually being a viable company making money. So they're partnering with Bosch to make their batteries. That's one of the things that
Bosch makes batteries?
I think Bosch subs out the batteries myself, but whatever.
Okay.
And so they're partnering with big companies to make the brake lines, the powertrain, and so forth. So basically, they're going to have to spread their IP among these many different companies to be able to make these trucks.
And this is like the complete opposite of what Tesla does, because Tesla is very, very vertically integrated. Everything from the seats to the battery packs to even the steering wheels in some cases.
And soon maybe even the cells. I mean, as we're hearing, they might be getting into the cell business.
Right.
So the moat here for Nikola is different than it is for Tesla. They claim that Nikola's moat is going to be their hydrogen station network. They claim that they would love it if other companies made hydrogen trucks because they will have the big network to refuel them.
So thinking about this in terms of thinking about Tesla, it's very different. They're different companies. Tesla currently doesn't sell any trucks. To be fair, neither does Nikola. But the idea here, let's think of it in terms of Tesla, how they function today. Mm-hmm. It would be as if Tesla sold their cars at cost, or maybe even at a little bit of a loss, and then they thought that they were going to make all their money back from the superchargers.
Right.
For sake of argument, that would be kind of the way that they would imagine doing that.
Yeah, I mean, Milton claims that companies like Daimler, who are also making electric trucks, that they only get the whatever the truck cost is, the $100,000, and then that's it. Whereas Nikola is going to get the cost of the truck plus the dollar per mile. And the dollar per mile is basically for the life of the truck, which is about 1 million miles. So they're going to make $1 million right off the beginning that they know they can go spend on the infrastructure. So it's almost like they're making the trucking companies like Anheuser-Busch and Walmart pay for the hydrogen charging upfront.
Interesting. Okay.
Now, another point I want to get to is autonomy.
Yes.
They are all believing in autonomy at Nikola. They say they believe in the next 10 years that most trucks will be, most freight will be delivered autonomously.
Yep.
But they do not make their own autonomous hardware or software. They're going to sub that out again to some other third party. So they claim that their trucks are autonomous ready, but that they are not going to make that themselves. So again, not vertically integrated. They're going to rely on some third party to do it. So Milton says that Nikola wants to be what Amazon is, right? Amazon doesn't just sell you stuff. It's the whole logistics system. It's the computers. It's the trucking. It's everything that gets you that product.
Right. Next day.
Exactly.
In some cases.
He wants to be this whole ecosystem from making the truck to fueling the truck.
But can't the same argument be made for Tesla? I mean, Tesla did make the entire ecosystem, and they claim that they will. They claim that they will make mega chargers for their fully battery electric trucks.
It's just that Tesla is not profiting off of the energy they sell you. They're selling you that energy at close to cost.
Although they could, but actually, even if they are selling you the energy at cost, that's going to benefit the trucking companies, which is in turn going to turn the trucking company, all things being equal, would turn trucking companies into Tesla customers as opposed to Nikola customers, because that dollar per mile might not be a dollar per mile, might be even cheaper.
Right. I think that the trucking companies are playing both sides of this play. I think they're being pretty smart, which is they're not going to put all their eggs into one basket. Right. They may think that Tesla is onto something, and so they put in orders for Teslas.
Because Anheuser-Busch has done that.
Yep, and so has Walmart, Pepsi, and so forth.
Lots of other companies.
But I think they're saying, hey, let's also put money into this play over here, because if this works, we'll have 2 trucks running on basically electric, and they'll all be clean, which is what we need to do, and they'll be cheaper.
So one of the things that I haven't heard enough about is how they're going to be producing the hydrogen in order to fuel the trucks. Is it going to be electrolysis from water, or is it going to be from natural gas? Because you can also make hydrogen from natural gas. Natural gas is hydrocarbons. The hydro part of the hydrocarbons are tons of hydrogen atoms stuck to carbon chains, and it's very easy to strip them off and release carbon dioxide into the air, which, as we know, is not very good.
And that's the point I want to make about hydrogen. Nikola will claim that hydrogen is the most energy-dense element in the entire atmosphere, which sounds great, but let's back up a couple steps.
What doesn't mean anything?
Well, so first of all, what are you going to use to make that hydrogen? Either water, which is fine, but like you said, natural gas. If it's natural gas, that's a fossil fuel that you dug out of the ground, and so that has a carbon footprint.
Right.
And then secondly, what electricity are you going to use to get this hydrogen? Are you going to use 100% renewable energy like solar, Or are you just going to use the grid? He said they're just going to use the grid, which means depending on where of the grid they're using, let's say that part of the grid is 40% produced by a coal plant.
Right.
Then your electricity that you use is 40% dirty.
And the same argument can be made for Tesla, but there's one key difference, which is that the energy that is going into a Tesla goes pretty much directly into a Tesla. The efficiency is at about high 90%.
Right.
And then the electric motor is about another 90%. It's a very efficient process. Whereas if you take that exact same electrical power coming from the grid, you put it through the process to make hydrogen, then the hydrogen goes into the truck after being pressurized, and then goes through a fuel cell, again, another layer of inefficiency. You're not going to get that truck as far with the same amount of energy that came from the grid, which makes a Tesla truck cleaner even with the same grid because you didn't have to do this rigmarole with the hydrogen stuff.
Right. Now, going back to Nikola, they claim that hydrogen is going to be awesome for making trucks, for making trains, for making planes, because it's so energy dense. And this all comes down to, I think, whether or not you believe hydrogen is going to be the fuel source of the future, or whether electric batteries, are going to be energy dense enough and cheap enough. That is kind of the play here. One is going to be cheaper than the other. That's just the way it's going to be. And so I don't think these both are going to be able to live for very long, because once one is cheaper than the other one isn't is economical.
And if we're assuming that the world is going to run off renewable energy, it's going to make a lot more sense to run everything off of batteries from the regard of just you need less energy to run them.
Right.
There are going to be cases, I think, that can be made for extenuating circumstances, places way far out in the world that, don't have as much access to renewable energy. These places are already pretty wild to live in and heavily rely on fossil fuels. I think that these places might be, the safe havens for hydrogen and perhaps even fossil fuels for some time to come. But I think the mainstream, the main point, the trucks that are running through the center of the United States and through Europe are probably going to be either one or the other. I don't think that there's going to be much of a mix.
I even think in hard to get to places, you can put wind turbines up there and batteries and power them. So, I don't think there's too many places where you're going to need to argue for hydrogen. I'm not against hydrogen if that's the only other alternative, and I'm not against Nikola. I think that Milton is doing this for the right reasons. He's a big fan of Tesla. He's a big fan of decarbonizing the transportation network. So kudos to him for doing this. And I think it's exciting to see two companies compete against each other.
Right.
So I don't want to pit one against the other. I'm excited to see them both competing together. I just wanted to give you guys as much information as I could about this Nikola Corporation, because I know a lot of you have been writing to me saying, should we invest?
Right.
And I think that's completely up to you guys. You're going to have to do your research and
keep your eyes glued to both the stock and the company, what they're doing.
I'll leave you with a couple things here. Milton said about Nikola that they're going to have 700 hydrogen charging stations, and they mentioned at the end of one interview that they'll be built out over the next 10 years. So that means about 70 a year if they build them linearly, which isn't a lot of charging stations if you think about it. That's very limited routes, whereas it's a lot easier to build out a mega charger station for Tesla. There's not a whole lot that goes into them.
Right.
They're already good at building them out.
It's just a big plug. It's a lot of electricity.
Right.
That's for sure. But you're going to need more electricity for the hydrogen.
Right. And Nikola claims that they will be the largest energy consumer in the world in 7 years. So if things go according to their plans, they claim they'll have so many trucks on hydrogen that they'll be one of the largest energy consumers in the world. That seems hard to believe to me, but
we will see.
We'll be following that. Anyway, thanks for joining us here on In Depth. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope that you subscribe and like our program so that we can spread this to as many people as possible. And we'll be back here every week, as we always are, with In Depth. See you then. Now you know.